All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Simplifying Network Automation with NetGru. I'm your host, NetGru Adrian. Happy New Year, first of all, to everyone. We're just starting calendar year 2025. It's going to be a super exciting year. We start this year, the live stream, with Ian, Tony, Birchall. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the stream. How are you? How you been? How are the holiday season? How was it for you?
We've been good. It's cold at the moment. Scotland's just suffering a bit of a cold, it would seem, but no snow, which is annoying. Just coldness that cuts right
It's
through you.
cold.
So, yeah. No, thank you so much for having me on. Doing well. We've really enjoyed the holiday break. It was nice to just get away from keyboards for a little while almost, and then now it's back into it. It's good fun.
Right back into it. It was like beginning of the year. So tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do? What's your role these days? I know you're working at CAE. And for folks that don't know CAE, if you could give us a bit of information around what was the company about, and what's your role there?
Certainly. So CAE are a managed service provider. So if you have a network, whether it's a enterprise size or a small, medium-sized business, and you want to utilize on-prem equipment, or such as your wireless LAN controllers and all these things that could be on-prem, or maybe you want to go down the cloud-based using Meraki, then we can support your needs effectively. We'll manage your networks and help troubleshoot any problems that come across your way, and probably also help you improve it as the time goes on as well, making small changes with our knock. I started at CAE about 2 years ago, just past,
Mhm.
and I started in the knock on the third line. And over that time, I was studying for my DevNet Associate as well, which is what's kind of led me to my programming stages as well. Um, and I've recently moved into the consultancy team, so I'll be going out and doing more builds and project-based work instead of just responding to incidents.
Nice, nice. So, what about your background? Tell us a bit about your background. Like, how did you get started into this?
So when I left school, I had no idea what a keyboard was really. I was absolutely terrible. I had no computing experience whatsoever. So I left school and decided that I just wanted to go into work. So I worked for a few years, got a kind of taste for the real world, and then decided after a while that computers seemed to be getting big. So around 2012, I think it was, I went to college and I studied Cisco NetAcad at
Mm-hmm.
college, going through there at the time 4 semesters. It's
Mm-hmm.
now cut down to three, I believe. So I did all of that and finished up and started working for a local data center here in Scotland. Did some work in the network team, worked my way from service desk up to their kind of network team there as well. And when I was about 3 years into that role, I got an opportunity to go teach back at the college that I was learning at a few years. So I then got into teaching for a good few years. So I've been out of the industry for a few years whilst I taught. It was about 8 years, and then decided after a while as much as I love the teaching element, which you can probably see on some of my content around My Mind's Madness. Um, I just missed the technical side too much. The downside of teaching was that I was just repeating the same things every year, whereas I was really just missing troubleshooting and engaging in new content. So I decided to try my luck out in the field again, and that's when CAE came along, and I got my job there, and I've loved every moment since. It's been great.
Nice, nice. So glad you found your passion, and it looks like it's going really well. So super nice to see that. So then tell us a bit about the project that we're going to talk about today. So I know you were saying you were studying for them an associate, kind of exploring all these APIs
Yeah.
and testing, messing around a bit, writing a bit of code, probably some Postman. I would imagine in there. So how did it come to be that you decided to use PyVis and build this visualization for Meraki, and what
Mm.
happened there?
I was mainly just playing around with different ways to interpret data that I could receive from APIs. So when I was studying for the DevNet, it was more just about like right interacting with APIs. How do I get information from a system. So even in part of my script, like there's elements where you're just putting it into nicely printed tables on the terminal that makes it look good for you and that you can utilize in a bit better way. And I was enjoying just doing that with the APIs, gathering the information, finding what information I thought was useful, and then playing around with it. And before I think Meraki announced this idea of they've got like a topology 2.0 that's now out on their platform, which is still awesome. It never really showed you where clients were. And I had this idea for what I like to call the Marauders WAP. So just a joke on Harry Potter. Like, I'd love to be able to know where people are, where they're actually connected. And if I could work this into Cisco Spaces, that'd probably be one of the next projects that I want to do. And the idea is like, all right, these users are connected to this AP and they're then going to jump over to this one. So I had this idea of being able to also track the actual endpoints and where they were within a small window of time, because I found out that the way that the Meraki API works is that I've got like a 5-minute polling period effectively for these clients based on the wireless. The wired one, bit less. So yeah, I really just wanted to start working, and PyVis was one of these ones. I think I'd seen John Capiobanco using it, and I was like, let's try some of this out. And when you do play around with PyVis, it's like a really cool, simple concept. Like, here's a node and here's an edge. Connect another node with an edge, and that concept's great. But then you want to start utilizing more of its features, and it can get quite complicated quite fast, which you'll notice on the topology page that I have. It's like just code upon code. So but it was just one of those fun little projects that I wanted to work on, to say like, okay, well, how can I get this information on screen in a decent way, which is interactive to an extent, and not just, maybe like a rubbish little MS Paint styled circle. And then it's on my kind of to-do list at the moment as well, but it's about expanding this code as well, because the one other element that you don't really get at the moment with Meraki and its topology base is that is purely for that one network. If you have a network in 2 different sites that are maybe connected by a WAN of some sort, you can't necessarily see both and how they get connected. So my next kind of step in my coding journey on this one is to try see if we can take that information as well into the topology data and show not just one site, but multiple networks. And hopefully as we even go through this code, you'll see how all the little bits that I've put into the code will help to feed that in the future as well.
Nice. So with coding, by the way, how did you get into coding, right? And what's your preferred language, or like your language of choice these days to program
I'm
in?
definitely a Python head. It's the only thing I've really learned. I have tried a few others, but Python is just so nice and simple and easy to use for me anyway. While I was teaching, I was lucky enough also to do a bachelor's in cybersecurity at the same time. And one of the units that I did was Python programming. And it was kind of my first instance into tasting what it was like. But it was completely devoid of any kind of networking or cybersecurity structure to it. It was just like, here's Python, learn Python. So I learned all of that. And for a little while, I sat on that thinking, okay, it was good. I somewhat enjoyed it, but I didn't see how it was relevant. And it was only when I started diving into the DevNet world, I was like, oh, well, we can maybe do this and change things like that and get into that. So that's when I started trying to just play around with the DevNet side of things. Like, what can I do with code and a device? Because I've always been a command line junkie. I really like working on the command line of a router and a switch. And as more things go towards GUI, I don't want to let go of that. So I thought, well, this is the way that I could do it, get a bit of both and best of both worlds. So yeah, I thought I'll work on that front and try to make it that, hey, if I can't code on the command line anymore because more things are going to the GUI, I'll make my own command line.
And build your own GUI at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Good stuff. So Meraki, right? So let's have a look at this thing, right? Like, you wanna share a screen, or do you wanna
sure.
share anything else before we jump into the actual demo?
No, I think we should be okay to do this now. So if I share this one, and what I have done Should hopefully share in a second. There we go. Lovely. So what I've already done, I've cloned the I've cloned the code from DevNet and GitHub already. So I've got that in a repository here. So is that an okay size text-wise? Let's do that. So if I go into
this is better.
Yeah, if I go into my clones and Meraki folder here, so everything's set up here, ready to pretty much go. So if you were to go and download from GitHub and do a pull, this is effectively what you would get. It runs on Python 3.10. So it's, if you're going to set up your virtual environment, make sure it's a 3.10. Otherwise, you'll have some problems that you will need to overcome with the requirements folder. I think there's basically two libraries that it doesn't like. So yeah, Python 3.10 is probably the best way to go. Once it's running though, we can just pretty much start up our virtual environment. So source, then bin activate, and then let's get into Visual Code. So that's going to be me leaving the kind of command line behind for a little while, and we're going to work from VS Code at this stage. So sorry. And yeah, at this point, we are going to get the entire kind of view of this. So I've written this entire code in very, very fractured places because at the time it's whilst I was learning to do all this work. So there would be a job to go back and effectively piece of code effectively that works as coherently as it probably should. But the way that I worked it was just like, okay, I'm trying to do this one thing at the moment, and I isolated everything. But it does also kind of come together in that sense. So it makes it easy to use from a command line point of view. So the way that I was working on this is the script itself, typically they're all very similar, but what I'll do is I'll quickly show you the first piece of code that I wrote for this, which was the get organization. It's one of the great things I love about the Meraki infrastructure is that even if you're learning to code and you're just trying to learn to understand APIs, you don't actually need to have any of the networking equipment to be able to interact with something that you can work with. Yeah. Obviously, it's beneficial, but at the same time, you can start to make organizations, networks, and SSIDs and wireless networks. You can do what you want without a single piece of kit. Yeah, so that's why I kind of liked it. So the other thing I did notice in the API or documentation is the fact that there is the SDK as well. So the first thing that I normally do is I avoid the import requests and I just go straight for import Meraki. So working with that, and I found that it's very helpful. There's only been one or two times where I've had to kind of deviate away from the import Meraki, and that's in some of my more kind of custom code for CAE, where I've had to utilize some of the early access APIs. So when you're doing that, you obviously need to, it's not coded into the SDK at that point in time in the same way. So you have to just do it by a traditional HTTPS
manually
URL.
pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed, I was learning all about, SDKs, and this was a great one as well to kind of help get me in there. So that was fun. So yeah, we use the Meraki SDK for all of this that we'll see today anyway. Import the OS library so that we can effectively read some variables, because one of the things I will say, when I was at my oldest networking job, I did do a really, really weird HTML based project. And the idea of that project was I was getting fed up of inputting the same things and just rewriting, basically running system configs. I was fed up of rewriting them, just changing IP addresses here, changing interface names here, fed up with that. So I created like this HTTP find and replace function. I had like in the back end, the entire running config, which was like my default configuration, and then 5 questions that just needed to be asked that would, you'd fill them out, and then it'd give you a spew out of the entire running config that you needed to put into the device. Because I'm lazy like that. I don't want to have to do it 100 times. But one of the things that I was kind of taught in that process was I had like subnet mask be one of the values that I had to put in. And I just left it originally as like, I'll let the user just put that in manually, and that's fine. And someone mentioned, why don't you have it be like a drop down so that no one can mistype the subnet mask, because that will cause us issues if that's the case. So from that point on, I've always tried to make it when I'm coding, it's like, if it doesn't need to be typed in manually, I will do everything I can to stop that from happening. So that's a cheat that I have in a lot of my code, which you'll see today.
No, because I mean, being a QA in a previous life, also I can tell you that you can never really anticipate what a user will do, right? You always think that you covered all possible
Yeah.
options, but that's never the case. A user of a software product will always come up with something that you would not expect. So as long as you can, just like give it to them cookie cutter, just drop down, don't fill in any values, anything anywhere. I'm for it also. I can definitely sympathize with that.
Yeah. It's me being lazy fundamentally, but then, it's just one of those things where it's like you say, people will type anything almost sometimes. So if you can
Yep,
take that option away and have it, as a hard code variable, it makes it so much easier. And then on top of that, it means I have to do like less verification on input. So
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
make
The input verification.
yeah, exactly. So for this particular one, I'm also using like the OS library and the .env library, so I can basically read information and store information in my little .env file that I've got. Now, at the moment, I've just got my API key in there under the Meraki API key. I'm happy to share this one at the moment, so it's just there. I'll be getting wiped by the end of this. But we've got our API key there, and that's stored. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to be like writing elements to that .env folder as well. So that a lot of stuff will go into that, and it'll change dynamically as we go through the code, which is again something that me being lazy likes. I'll just minimize a few bits here. This entire section is just 3 functions and 1 call. I don't even have like my main function again, because this was like one of the first pieces of code that I actually learned to do. So I don't have like name if kind of stuff and have my main program. I've just got it like run it here. So the idea would be that we get the list of organizations, and using the Meraki dashboard, so we just make our session, and then we have
Mhm.
a try and accept loop, which again, that was something that I introduced later as I was learning, because at first it was just like, do that, do this and be done. But then obviously if errors happen, how do you handle that? So I was working on the idea of, right, well, let's learn try and accept. So I have a lot of that in this script where we have try and accepts, and the error messages are always pretty much give me what the error status, the reason, and the message that comes with it to help me troubleshoot and diagnose. Although I will say the print statement, which you can even see remnants of here, is probably one of my favorite troubleshooting tools. So this one is simply going off and creating a variable and grabbing all the organizations that a particular API key has access to. And then
Mhm.
we create a empty dictionary, which we're going to populate with this script. And then for every organization in that list that we retrieve, we populate the dictionary with a name of the organization and its ID. And then we just simply print that to a nice pretty table on the terminal. So if I run this now, hopefully the live gods will serve me use. There we go. So we've now got a nice pretty output for my Meraki test lab here. And that was great. That's fantastic first dive into getting information that I wanted out of an API call. The information you get back about the organization is things like location and all these things. So I just trimmed back the information that I did want. Fairly certain there was just one big print organizations on this line here, and then I think later on you might even see like I've got pretty print put in there, or I print into JSON in points, just so I can try read the information that I was getting back off it every time. So that is that kind of first stage, and again, it was just me being lazy. Then I was like, right, well, this is cool, but I want to be able to create. So then we jump into creating organizations, and we follow pretty much a similar process here, where same libraries being imported, same variables being read. So nothing too dramatic here at the moment.
Session
Um,
established. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But the only thing that we have is now just input for the user. So I had that idea of, well, obviously, if we're going to call something, that's the time when we do have to have input from a user. So that was a nice one where it's just, okay, grab the input of a name. And then we actually go through a process of creating the organization. We have that session running. We get a list of organizations. So one of the things I like to do as well is effectively print, okay, this is what's there at the moment. and then I'll print what's there at the end once you're done as well, almost like verification on the terminal. And then I've also, the reason why we do this particular line here as well is that we want to see if that name exists. There's nothing worse than if you try to overwrite. And again, this was one of those problems that I came across where it's like, I was trying to create the same like test organization, and it would come up with like, oh, this network already exists. So, okay, I need a way around that. And again, if someone were to try create that, if someone else was using this, I need to be able to ensure that they're not going to effectively type an organization that exists and then inadvertently break something. So yeah, I've got do that, and if the organization isn't there, we'll create it, and if it does exist, we get a nice little message that says, hey, this one exists already. And then this is the list of the organizations, pretty much just pulled straight out from the actual code of the last one. Like, let's say it's literally piecemeal. I just pulled it, plonked it in here. It was lovely. And then we run the two functions here. So we say the org to be created and then go from there. So let's again try this, and we'll create a NetGru. Boom. Organization successfully created. And then now if we do our get,
should be, there you go.
They are so easy, right? So nice and easy. And we've now got a org ID for your particular code. The other thing I will quickly do as well is I'll just create another one really, really fast. Call it toDelete. Boom, created. And then we'll run. I'll hide this. So there we go. We've now got 3 networks created really quick. Now, if you're like CAE and we have potentially lots of customers coming on board under one kind of financial year, creating customers like this really, really quickly is beautiful. You don't need to worry too much about setting up everything on the GUI because that's 100 clicks, 2 command lines, done here. And that's why I quite like that function. That obviously did lead to, hey, well, let's do pretty much something identical where we delete the actual network. And this prompted one of my next things, which I say, I don't want the user to be able to type a network. I want them to be able to select it and then potentially hit an "Are you sure?" So we've got import inquirer here. Again, just pulling loads of config from other places. And the inquirer, all that does is it grabs that dictionary that we make earlier, where we have a list of all the networks. So this effective table here, and it just says, okay, give me a selection list and make the user select it. So if we now run this part, there we have, prints out a list of them just to be on the safe side anyway, and then the ability on the command line to select which.
Oh, nice.
So again, if I just now select to delete, away it goes. So that organization was deleted, and we're left with the remaining 2. Again, just keeping it nice and simple. One script does one thing kind of thing, and that's what I like about it.
Inquirer. So, okay, I didn't know about that. Cool.
It's really cool, and I've utilized Inquirer quite a few times to similar benefit, and it pops up a lot in this code base. So I do like it. There's another one that I utilize as well, where we can do like auto population of text, which will come up as we talk about networks as well. So with this one, I've now maybe got a thing where I want to maybe say I've got other code which says, okay, well, let's view the networks that exist in each of these organizations. But in order to view an organization's network, you need to have these codes. You need their ID numbers within the API call. Now, obviously, we don't necessarily want to be adding those in manually. As I say, I'm very lazy, so don't want to do that every time. So what I've got is this organization select. And the concept of this one is if I just run this, same kind of concept, that inquirer tool comes up and asks us, okay, well, which network do you want to select? And before I select one, if we just go to that environment, you'll see there's nothing in here except just that one line. And then we'll select NetGru. And all it's done is it's just pasted all that information that we need into our environment variable, which we can then use for later use when we're checking out the networks that exist within certain networks. So, or running different commands that also operate here. So this whole section is just all organization create, delete, select, and view. So and that's what that does. If we look at networks, you'll see it's got exactly the same set of options. Yeah, but within that concept of, okay, we're now looking at a single organization. So now because we've got NetGru selected, if I do networks get, it's going to probably tell me there are no networks. I'll get a blank table back because we've not created one for your net space. So I can go to create. And this is where a few other things had to come into play. Meraki OS Inquirer is back in use here. And then this one here, the prompt toolkit, if you've ever seen this one before, this one comes in really handy when we're trying to get information like a massive list of possible inputs. Again, I don't want people to be able to type, say, the way that this one works is it calls up the time zones. So you have to be able to create a time zone when you're creating a network, and they obviously have to fall within that. And I needed the list that Meraki utilized for that. So I had to go find out all of that. That was a bit of research. And I just did like what I classed as like the top 20 or so. So I just threw in 20. We can add more, obviously. It's just about getting the right information. And the idea of this is I want to put in Europe, London as my option, but I don't want the user to type that in incorrectly. And the list is too long to use the Inquirer in the same way, right? Because you'd end up like just scrolling for ages and then you'd probably miss the one that you're looking for. So the way that this particular script then works is that it'll allow you to start typing, and then it uses that prompt to effectively say, all right, well, let's find out which one matches nearest. So if I run this one, so we want to create a network. What is the network name? We'll call it NetGru1. What type of products are we getting? Now, this is the other cool thing with the Inquirer option. Instead of just being able to select one, we can now actually select multiple options. And you could then submit all 3 of those options that I've selected, or I can deselect things as I go as well. It's a really, the Inquirer tool, I love it on the command line. It is great. So yeah, there's just put those. So I'll hit enter on that. And then now we've got this time zone selection. So the idea would be that I want to start typing London, for example. And as you see straight away, these start popping up for you already. And you can just highlight and select. And away it goes and creates that network for you. So again, me being very lazy, not wanting people to type things in incorrectly and do input verification. Instead, I just make it like, right, they can select something and then move on. I've just seen George ask a question. Is it a repository? Yes, it is. This one is on GitHub under MyMindsMadness Meraki. And it's also in the Cisco DevNet Code Exchange. It's the one piece of code that I've got up there as well.
And we'll have the link also at the end here in the comments, Jorge. I will share with you.
Yeah. So yeah, your network has now been created. So let's just try run the networks get again, just to see what we get. And just because things are a bit large at the moment, let me just minimize this. So we can now see, okay, so we've got your network, its network ID, what type of products exist within this, and the time zone that it's in. The other thing that we can add onto this, I'll just do it quite quickly. Oh, it's down here. Should be, where are you?
And in the meantime, while you find that, Ian, Jorge also asked to be a dev. Is it necessary to have some networking background, or does it help CCNA prior to move to DevNet? So I'm going to take a quick step and I'll let you, Ian, also answer this. So it's not really necessary for you to know networking, right, to get into DevNet, but it helps, right? So you'll see as you start studying for DevNet, as Ian did, a while back with the DevNet Associate, it's not really expecting you to know anything prior to getting started with DevNet content, right? So we take you from not assuming you have any background, and then we show you Python, we show you APIs, we show you netconf, Yang, RESTconf, how everything comes together, data structures. So going back to your question, Jorge, it's not necessary, but it helps. The more you know, if you have a bit of networking background, and then we start talking about IP addresses and subnets, subnet masks, and all of that, then you will know right away. If you're strictly a developer and I tell you a subnet mask, you might be confused. You don't know what it is. So that's my take on it. What do you think, Ian?
I think you're right. I believe the DevNet Associate exam certainly has networking content within it. I think there's
Hmm.
20% of it, which is like networking basics, if I was to look at the exam topics. Um, for the most part, from sitting that back in March, it is predominantly understanding IP addresses, their format, their structure, and port numbers. That a lot of port numbers, like understand like the TACAX port number, RDP, like that came up quite a lot as well. So you'll there is that element of understanding bits of networking, but I wouldn't say it's essential. Like I say, 20% of that exam covers some basic networking. The rest is pretty much in understanding and interpreting different languages and data structures. So from that respect, in theory, you could probably pass the DevNet Associate with your 80% approximate answers correct without knowing a single bit of networking technically. But yeah, it's definitely going to help because you're talking about doing things like even some of the API calls that we do in the DevNet kind of track. You're looking at Cisco DNA, formerly DNA, now Catalyst Center. Right? So you're looking at some of those APIs and doing like path traces. So understanding what they are in the first place, it does help. But I would say that you can kind of get into networking certainly without any kind of networking background and do some of your DevNet stuff as well. It just helps.
Exactly. All right. Hope that answers Jorge. And thanks for joining, by the way. Who else we have here? Erica. Hey, Erica, Jack,
There we go.
Rodrigo, Vizcara. Hey, Rodrigo. Thanks, folks, for joining.
Yeah, I think that's getting some questions from the YouTube as well, so we know that that's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, the other thing that I was just going to show here is like this table anyway is just to strip down pieces of information that we can put into the table. But for the most part, this is all that we really need when we're creating networks. We just need to understand the products and the time zone. But there is other information that we could grab and put into this table. That's probably better when we're doing something else though later on. I'll show you. And equally with this one, we can create more networks very, very quickly and easily. So if I just try to do this again, so, oh, I've done get, sorry. Let's do create. Let's see what NetGru 2 comes, NetGru 1 should get an error back for this one. So, yeah, go through them all first. Yeah, bad request. Name's already been taken. So that comes back. Happy days. Anyway, we'll create one. We'll create NetGru 2. Just an appliance and a switch, and we'll put that in Europe as well. Cool. And then I can, and again, thing that I love, like now that I've been running some of these scripts, I can just use up to rerun these scripts, and it's me getting back onto the command line. So a lot of you might be wondering, like, how am I running this? So I'm literally just pressing up on my keyboard, and you can probably see just down here, the line changed from my get script that I'm running to my create script that I'm running. That's it. So again, it's me being lazy and getting very much back into my command line infrastructure that I'm used to. So we've done the creates. Let's do a network get. And now we should see there's our 2 networks. Happy days. And similarly, we can do a network delete. We've seen the organization delete, the network delete is almost identical, so I won't waste too much time doing that. And the network select works very, very similarly as well. If I run this one, it's a case of, okay, select the network that we want to be part of, and we'll go with NetGru. And if I go back into my
that
environment,
basically saved it into your environment, right?
exactly, yeah.
Cool.
So it keeps doing that. And like I said, it's me being lazy. That's coming up a lot. I should probably stop saying that now. So that is the network kind of get concept as well. And we're just, again, like these 8 scripts that I've written so far, they were all just me playing around with the Meraki base, which anyone can do by creating a free account on Meraki. Yeah, you can create networks, you can create organizations, you can knock your socks off without even having a single piece of hardware, which is kind of the beauty of Meraki as well, and learning how to handle and interpret different APIs. The next probable thing it's worth probably going over is I do also have some of like the troubleshooting tools enabled. So probably one of my favorite ones, like just the blink LEDs. There's nothing special, I would say, about this one, other than the fact that it just goes through the process. Like you have to find out the device ID. So one of the things we do is we get the organization that we're in, we get the network that we're in, we search the devices that we have in that organization, and then we'll flash particular APs. So it's I can probably show it if we go through the idea of selecting my Meraki network instead of the NetGru one. So let's go into there. Brilliant. And then network, I should just have the one. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm effectively just overriding the information so we can see
in the environment file that
network, and that ends in 554. There you can see 554. So it's nice in that sense of I don't need to worry about finding it, pasting it, or copying it. It's just doing it all for me. So now I should have a device in here. And if we go to blink LEDs, this one obviously is useless because it doesn't really show you anything. You have to actually be at the LEDs. But we've got 2 APs in this network, so I could just do that, and it's going to say LED is blinking. Like, it's not much proof for you right now, but I can assure you it's blinking. So it's a fun, like there's a few bits of the kind of troubleshooting ones that I'm still building out as well. The ability to reboot a device, for example. We can take this one, reboot a particular AP or a switch that I've got in this network. So I'll just reboot switch 2 at the moment, for example, and yeah, that'll go away and do everything it needs to do. Traffic analysis is still in kind of its working format, so it's pulling back decent information. That's one of the things when you start to get more into like the device side element, you need to have devices and traffic flowing through it in order for it to get decent information for you to see. And then the thing that I started to get bored with or wanting to know more about was like, yeah, how can I kind of visualize the network that we have and how can we build up with that? And that's where PyVis came into things. So I don't know if anyone's seen PyVis much before, but I built this kind of nice little demo to show here before we actually go into the mass that is the script within the actual topology maker. But the idea of PyVis is that you want to add a particular node. So this will create like one single circle on the space that we can look at. So if I just mute out all of this, and we just save that and run. This bit down here, this is kind of more for me. So firstly, the net show is what is going to print out my network diagram that I am making, and it's going to print out to a file called pyvis.html. Yeah. Notebook false was needed to be added as a kind of last minute thing, actually, because for some reason it wasn't allowing the print tab. It was saying that it was a value that was null. So I've had to change that. I have the path to this HTML file that I want to put in. So that works. And then I take that path, and because I run WSL, I use a sub-process, and it allows WSL to access Internet Explorer, for example, or other Windows utilities. Because one of the horrible things about using WSL is when you like say, all right, use Firefox, you get like this tiny little pop-up that comes up. It's, you know, it's not very well contained. So being able to call it into your Windows environment just makes it that much nicer. So that's more for me when I do this. So there's a bit at the end of my code that is purely for that. You may need to change that to your own liking. But if I run this one just now, it should automatically pop up with a PyVis diagram somewhere. Ooh. There we go. Here it is. So it's just loading. There we are. Nice single node that you can draw around. Yeah, one node, doesn't need to do much, right? So then if we were to start maybe say adding a couple extra bits here, so we can unmute this. This is us adding a second node, and let's just create a link between those two nodes. So a link between them is known as an edge in PyVis. So if we now run this, it's effectively going to override the current file that I've got. So I should be able to just load it up, but it's going to do it automatically. There you go. Now I've got 2 devices linked. And again, I love that it's interactive and that you can play around with it. Okay. However, you don't necessarily want to just add 1 node, add 2 node, add 3 node, add 4 node. You maybe want to add a bit more. So we can add nodes using lists, which is what this section does. So we say, right, create nodes 3, 4, and 5. And then we're going to have, okay, the first shape is going to be a circle. Then there's going to be a square. And then there's going to be a triangle. And that applies directly to the device or the node that you've got in that list. Same with the title that we might put on them as well. And then let's also finish up by adding all the rest of these edge nodes. And then we'll run this now. And you should see a nice kind of circular topology with triangles, squares, and circles. Like it's a very, very easy piece of code to use if you've ever been playing around with it. And the fact that you can change the image is what then started to build my interest in the code as well. Because it's like, right, if I can change the shape, surely there must be a way to change it to be an image that I want. And that was kind of my main thing. So I found like all of the Meraki topology information. So if I go down here, I've got this Meraki topology stuff. And it's literally just the images for certain topology icons. I was like, right, so let's utilize those icons and have them go next things. But naturally, that then means that the code that supports that has to be quite big. So for every device type that you have, I've tried to make it generic. So here's a wireless access point. For me, it wouldn't matter if it's an MR33 or an MR18. It'll just come up with this image, and same with switches at the moment. So this actual code is here. And there's a few things in here. We've got the Meraki topology again, Meraki SDK operating system, and then .nev again. PyVis network, that's how we import this function. And pprint is just pretty print and I was using that before I got used to, the JSON indent 2 stuff that you might sometimes need to do. Yeah. So I've still not imported JSON on this one, but there we go. And yeah, we do the same things. We access the information, and the way that this script works is I've got a small lab that we're running. This one only has a switch and 2 APs, but if you go back through some of my old content as well, you'll see I've done bigger topology spaces with clients as well. I just, because of everything that I'm showing, I didn't want to do a massive one like that just now. And the way that it works is effectively it grabs the MAC address. So let's say there's quite a lot of code going into this one that all does tiny little bits, and there's lots of iterative loops over different devices. But the concept is that, let's get rid of this one and this one just now. Minimize things, make it easier to build. So we run the network topology using the network ID that we're currently running. So again, the network ID that we have is stored here, and we're pulling that in, and that's how we're going to build this network topology. So that network topology starts here. We set up our session to Meraki, and we're simply pulling back the network topology data from Meraki. So that effectively grabs every node in your network, I'll call it an intermediary node anyway. So switch, access point, router, firewall. If it's there, we'll find it because that's what this information gives us. So we find that information, and basically we're going to start building our topology from that. Now, that information contains things like MAC address, serial number, device type, what if it's an appliance, if it's an access point. So it's got lots of different information. And this is where one of my problems comes in. Third-party devices, I'll also find them, but they don't necessarily always have the same thing. So the first step in all of this is basically, is it Meraki or not? Like, that's the way that we kind of just build it. Because if it's Meraki, I go through the Meraki pre-builder. Like that's this happening here. So if we have a device in the node list, so all that information that we return, if we get a device, typically means that it's a Meraki device. Yeah. And then if it doesn't have that, it's probably some other device that we're not 100% sure on. We can find information out about it, but that's got to be built up at the moment. Like the base of what that can find is massive, obviously. It could be Juniper, could be anything really. So rather, right now, I've just focused on Meraki. So
okay, so this is kind of built with future functionality in mind, because yes. I mean, you're accessing Meraki dashboard, you're just gonna get Meraki, but as you add more, you could be Catalyst Center, for example, connecting and just putting the API key in there, or an SD-WAN, or like you said, Juniper or Arista, or whatever it is. So it's kind of, I see here kind of like you prepared it for the future.
Yeah, trying to. At one point, I think when I was early on in the code, I had this like, else, if unknown, but it never got hit once I set this up, because everything always either came back with device or non-device. So it was just
Yeah.
a pointless else statement. So let's have, what we'll do is we'll go through the like Meraki node build, the pre-builder anyway. So that's up here. And the idea of this, as you can see, quite a bit of if-else's going on. But we firstly grab the MAC address info from that output that we've already received from the network topology call that we did earlier. We create a list where we're going to append that node information, because that's important when you're building a topology. The last thing I want is to have, say, switch number 1, and I see, okay, switch number 1 connects to AP. I then get AP and it says AP connects to switch number 1. I'm going to inadvertently create 2 links between that if I don't map that properly. So I had to go through a whole process of how do I determine that this has already been done before. So part of that is by having this node list, and it helps the program keep track of, okay, I've noted this device connects to this device, I won't do it again, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that helps there. I've also got another list, similar kind of process, but just 2 lists doing similar things effectively. And what we then got is all the information that we can get from that device. So here you can see name, model, product type, serial, status, clients, lots of information we can get. And then we are effectively going to say, this is this type of device, this is its serial number, and this is its status. And the reason why I've got this is one of the cool things you can do on PyVis is when you hover over a device, you can get information from that device as well. So this caption that we are creating effectively will give us the model number, its serial number, and its status. But we could swap out any of that. One thing I didn't put in here is like IP address. You can put IP address in there. Any of that information that we got in that original grab of information, we can pull into this script, which is lovely. And it's like, this is just what I felt at the time was okay to show. Then we start having a look at the different product types, and this product type stuff, all it's really doing is, in this case, selecting what type of image would go well with the product type. So again, wireless gets this image, and then camera would get a camera image, appliance gets that. But the other thing we do is in the wireless, for example, we also have what's called the client builder. So this is the part of the script, this is the part of the script which is effectively now going out and saying, right, we're mapping the access point at this point in time, and we're grabbing all the information about it. Some of the information we can grab whilst we're on this access point is which clients are currently connected to it and how long have they been connected, and information like that. So this then goes off and does its own builder as well, adding more nodes. So that, again, this is where it gets very complicated in the sense of you've got it going, we're building a list already, and now we're going to go out of that and continue building upon that list for each AP. So this goes off and does pretty much the same thing, except it has to do a different API call. So it's doing a client API call rather than a API call. And same with the switch. So if we've got a switch, we also do a builder there where we go out and grab information about the switch. The builder itself, very, very simple. All it needs to do is we just add a node with the information that we want it to have. So we've got the label, title, which we use the caption from, the shape, in which case we're using image, and then the image that we're using is this icon that we've passed through in our script. So we're always there's lots of return elements where we send these pieces of information through. So in this instance here, Meraki node builder, we're sending the label of the device icon, and then the caption, and then that's all getting utilized here as well. Client builder or pre-builder, sorry, like say it's doing something very similar, it goes off and collects all information about the devices that are connected to wireless. This is where we have the limit of 5 minutes. There's a 300-second kind of time span that is the minimal that I can select. So there are some instances when I've run this where I'll see a client connected to 2 APs because within 5 minutes they've maybe done a roam. So you'll see that on the scripts when you output it. And then the rest of it is just, again, grabbing the information that we're then going to pass into the Meraki client builder so that we can then have actual information on screen. So if I then run this at the moment, should do something very similar. It goes off, builds a log builder, and then should just open up there we go. And we now have a test AP here. If I hover over it, you can see it's a MR18, there's a serial number, it's got no clients. This is my switch that's connected in this particular network, and then the AP. This is an unknown device that we've mapped, or at least gathered information on it. It's pretty much the home hub router that this all connects to, but it's just effectively that it's come up as unknown, but I know what it is. And the other cool thing with this is with PyVis, you can also start searching by nodes. So you can actually like say, all right, I want to search that. And then we have that there. We maybe want to search by a network item. If I clear this, go and reset. So we can maybe have a look at edges that are from, and then this switch, and filter it. And then we can see these ones have come from here. And that's one other part I've actually not shown at the moment. It's the actual final build. So far, we've just looked at this iterative loop where we go through every device and then it goes and grabs clients as well. The actual connections, that's where we pull in those lists that I was mentioning earlier, where it'll say, okay, well, if we've discovered this device and we've discovered this device, how do we then map their connections? I've got a couple try excepts here where sometimes there was a point where I had a Cisco switch in there, just a like old Catalyst 3000 series, and it was just acting as my kind of PoE switch for my APs for a point before I got my hands on a Meraki one. And the information I was getting back from that wasn't great because your Meraki will grab that information from that switch because it's got it in CDP, for example, so it can grab information there, but it's not necessarily as accurate as you'd like it to be. So yeah, there was a point there where I was just like, okay, well, if I don't know what it is, let's just assign it as port X just in case. But the cool thing here again is with your connections that you can actually add information nodes, say, okay, this connects on this port and it connects to this port. So if I go back to this topology, hover over this node, there you go. So you can see it connects to port 3 on the switch and port X on the AP, because obviously the device on the Meraki side is not giving me the right information. And then on this one, however, I've got port 0 and port 2. So it shows me where those things are connecting. And again, there's a little bit of tweaking to do on that just to make it a bit more fine-tuned, but it's certainly in its early days of giving you the right information at a glance. And it's pretty scalable at this point. Like I say, I've done different images in the past where you can see like, okay, it's 2 switches, multiple APs, lots of clients connected, and you can see all of that. Like say, I'll share an image if I can find one pretty quickly.
So I was wondering, do you get
it was fun.
Ian, do you get latitude and longitude or that type of information also with your API call for? I'm wondering, because then you could place them on a map. If you get latitude, longitude, you can have like a world map, and that would kind of be next level to this.
Yeah, that would be the next step on there as well, which would tie into like the one that I did a little while ago, which was the trace route or the trace map that I created a little while ago. I think you mentioned as well. Yeah, I can't remember if latitude and longitude. It's certainly a piece of data that is in the Meraki portal. It must be something that is returned within the API. I just haven't done it. That's all. So, but yeah, I would be surprised if I couldn't.
Yeah, me too. It's somewhere in there for sure. Like latitude, longitude, for sure. There you can find it somewhere with one API call, and that would be really cool to have it placed on a map.
It might not necessarily be the like the network topology data call, but it might be the device call. So if we were to do like a device AP call, because normally on Meraki you program the AP and then you put its address location or its physical address, that's probably where you'd get it on a per device basis. So chances are, let's just query it. So if I've got my Meraki devices and we are, so that's where we get device name for my AP, Meraki pre-builder. So that's the node.
You want to do like a print somewhere?
I'm just kind of thinking I must have something, print, because it's the best. Let's have a look here. All right, so that's wireless client, so that's not actually the device. I thought I had a device call here, but I don't. But yeah, I'd really be surprised if I could get that.
Curious.
I'm gonna have to get back to you.
No,
I'm
no
fairly certain we could.
No worries.
Because that's similar to, I said I don't think I've got this one loaded on my computer, but I did that trace map one on LinkedIn a little while ago, where the idea is like you run a trace route and it gives you that kind of hacker styled GUI of here's the world map and here's everywhere it went to get to where it is. And that's fun. Again, that's based on latitude and longitude. I will say from my experience on that one, if you want to get latitude and longitude information from an IP address, typically any of the kind of API calls that you might use to do that, they may come with a charge. Yeah. So depending on how frequently you use it or how many calls you make, it can quite quickly go from a free version to a requirement for a more pricey version.
Gotcha. Yep.
There are a few free ones out there, but I think there's limits to how many calls you can make before it's like, okay, that's you cut off.
Gotcha.
Same with like text systems. Like for me, it was all just about playing with something new and shiny. Like when I was learning to code, it was like, how could I do this and how could I do it? So one of the ones that I do have, which is fun, is the NASA alerts. So I've used like the NASA APIs, and I simply every day get this is the astrological picture of the day come through, or every Friday we get the weekly update of hazardous objects. And it's always just been, okay, what can I play around with? What's a good way to send this data to myself? What's a good way to have this displayed to people? So that's what I've always been working on. And I like being able to put things into maps. I think graphical displays are excellent, really, really useful. I tried a while ago, like you get some systems where you can text to yourself, certainly the UK. So you can text yourself output, or hey, this command finally successfully run, and you get certain amounts of texts for free, and then you have to pay for more. So some are financial problems why I've not been able to pursue them further.
Yeah,
fun though.
Fun times. So there's one comment here from Jorge again. We are allowed to. Okay, so hold on. Pretty cool seeing the code and actually getting it. I've been reading about ways of automating these sort of processes. And I would like to know if this is a way to approach this. Yes. So this is exactly how you would automate and build a visualization tool, right, for your Meraki infrastructure in this case. We are allowed to integrate some presets through another document, such as YAML, Yang, JSON, to actually automate this, right? Well, I don't know what you mean exactly with that question, but the env, the .env file that Ian created, right? That's kind of like a text file, and you save information in here, and you kind of grab it. You use it kind of like a basic storage place where you save information, network ID, organization ID, device ID, that type of thing, and then you just retrieve it from that location when you have your subsequent calls, API calls, and functions. So that's the idea there. If you want to save it as a YAML, right, or JSON, that's really up to you.
I mean, any call that you make with the Meraki API, you can get JSON content back like, straight off the bat, and then you could save that as a JSON file. You can convert it into YAML, so you can utilize any of that information. The idea of this script anyway is that I don't necessarily need to go around and say, okay, I want this particular device's JSON information, because again, the way that I've built it is the idea that I want to be lazy, and I've got my devices section here actually. Let's have a look. So we can say get device information here. Run this one, and there we can see get all the information that I need for those devices in this table, but it comes out in this format initially. So I've obviously not needed this out.
There you go, latitude, longitude,
where you've got
right
all
there.
the information. Yeah, so it is there, yes. So yeah, get rid of that. So we've got that information quite nicely. You can put it into JSON if you want and if you need. So that's the joy of that.
Gotcha. All right. So then, anything else, Ian? I think we covered quite a bit.
I think we have, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, it looks pretty straightforward. Where can people find this repo, by the way, since we had a question about it? And can people contribute to this if they want to, improve or add? Do you take pull requests for the repo? Like how?
I will, yeah. Like I've not had one, but sorry, I've gone to the wrong place. So it's GitHub, MyMindsMadness. That's what I'm after. So if you go to github.com, MyMindsMadness, there's one right here just called Meraki. That is the entire repo. You can pull that down. So it's also on the DevNet Code Exchange, but that just links back to here effectively anyway. So yeah, everything's there that you would need, and got your instructions onto how to start playing around with it, how to use it. So everything you should need is there.
Cool. And I also wanted to
and there's
mention,
your image of what it can. Yeah, sorry. There's an image of what the map can look like if you play around with it well.
Cool. Yes. So I just wanted to also mention, right, like you were saying, to get started with the Meraki API, you don't really need any infrastructure. You can create your organizations, your networks, all of that. But then as you start trying to be more advanced, right, you can also use the DevNet sandbox that's freely available for you folks. So developer.cisco.com. You can find there an actual Meraki sandbox. By the way,
there's the always on one. I think the other one's off at the moment, right? The reservable
there's
one.
the always on. The reservable one is there's some issues with SSO but those will be resolved. But yes, just keep in mind you can use those sandboxes, and you have access to virtual devices. So you have virtual switches. They don't actually exist, but they give you the option of doing API calls and getting data as if it were an actual real device, real camera, real switch, real appliance.
And just if I can finish up on the code, see like the amount of effort that's been this code's been growing with me within CAE as well. Like I've utilized this to onboard customers, and we've used it to create webhooks en masse, because webhooks can be annoying because you have to do like a template for every single network. And if you've got a customer with, let's say, 200 networks, that gets out of hand pretty quick. So you can use the early API access. You can get like, okay, we'll set a template for an organization, and then for every network we'll do it. So we've done things like that, which make onboarding our customers so much easier and much more streamlined. And yeah, it's grown a lot just from these kind of initial kind of basics, or that kind of template that I've started using here. That's all built out to do so much more in my mind as well.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ian. Thanks, folks, for joining. We're back live streaming. Started the year on a high note. Continuing next week. Also, we'll have Claudia De Luna as a guest. We'll talk with her about network automation and all of that, and the project that she's been working on. And yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you, Ian, again, and see you folks next time. Take care, everyone.